The midnight discovery. The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the empty corridors of the Secret Service headquarters as Marcus Reeves made his way through the silent building. At 28, he was one of the youngest analysts ever appointed to the Special Operations Division. But tonight he wasn't here on official business. His security badge clicked against the card reader, granting him access to the archives section. The smell of old paper and leather bindings filled the air as he navigated through rows of filing cabinets. His father's last words echoed in his mind. Find file TR 7391. The truth needs to come out. Marcus's father, James Reeves, had served as Deputy Director of Operations before his mysterious death 3 months ago. The official report claimed it was a heart attack, but Marcus had found inconsistencies in the medical examiner's report that kept him awake at night. He'd reached the section containing classified files from the 1990s. His fingers traced along the labels until they stopped at TR 7391. The folder was thinner than he expected, its edges worn with age. As he pulled it from the cabinet, a photograph slipped out, floating to the floor like an autumn leaf. Marcus bent to retrieve it, his breath catching in his throat. The image showed 5 people standing in front of an unmarked building. 4 wore standard government suits, but the 5th figure caught his attention. A woman in a white lab coat, her expression serious beneath wire-rimmed glasses. On the back was written, Project Oracle, Phase 1 complete. Dr. Natalia Harrison, lead researcher. The name triggered something in his memory. His father had mentioned Dr. Harrison once, during a rare moment of candor after too many drinks. She was brilliant, he'd said, but they made her disappear. Marcus opened the file, his trained eyes scanning the heavily redacted documents. Most pages were blocked out with thick black lines, but certain phrases jumped out: genetic enhancement, cognitive augmentation. Subject showed remarkable abilities. A noise from the corridor made him freeze. Footsteps approached, accompanied by voices. Marcus quickly photographed the remaining pages with his phone, returned the file to its place, and slipped into the shadows between the cabinets. 2 security guards passed by, their flashlights sweeping across the room. Marcus held his breath until their footsteps faded away. He waited another minute before moving, his heart pounding against his ribs. Back in his apartment, Marcus spread the photographed documents across his desk. His father had been investigating Project Oracle before his death. But why? And what connection did it have to Dr. Harrison's disappearance? One document caught his eye. A memo dated June 15, 1995. Subject demonstrates unprecedented capabilities. Recommend immediate termination of program. Risk factors exceed acceptable parameters. The memo was signed by Director William Blackwood, current head of the Secret Service. Marcus leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his dark hair. He'd always suspected there was more to his father's death, but this was bigger than he'd imagined. Project Oracle wasn't just another classified operation. It was something that had made the most powerful people in the intelligence community nervous enough to bury it completely. His phone buzzed, displaying an unknown number. Marcus answered cautiously. Mr. Reeves, a woman's voice spoke, her tone measured. I understand you're looking into Project Oracle. Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. Who is this? Someone who knew your father. Someone who knows why he died. A pause. If you want answers, come to the River Bend Cafe tomorrow at noon. Come alone. The line went dead before Marcus could respond. He stared at the phone, then at the documents spread across his desk. His father had always taught him that the truth came with a price. The question was, how much was he willing to pay to uncover it? Outside his window, the city lights twinkled like distant stars, oblivious to the secrets buried in their midst. Marcus knew that come morning, he would have to make a choice: walk away and live with the questions, or dive deeper into a mystery that had already claimed at least one life. The photograph of Dr. Harrison seemed to watch him from the desk, her eyes holding secrets that had remained buried for decades. Tomorrow, he would take the first step toward uncovering those secrets, knowing that each revelation would bring him closer to understanding why his father had to die. Shadows of the past. The River Bend Cafe sat nestled between aging brick buildings, its faded awning fluttering in the autumn breeze. Marcus arrived early, choosing a corner table that gave him a clear view of both entrances. He'd brought his father's old service weapon, concealed beneath his jacket, a precaution he hoped wouldn't be necessary. At precisely noon, a woman in her 60s entered the cafe. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and though she walked with a slight limp, her movements held a deliberate grace. She scanned the room before approaching Marcus's table. "I'm Regina Walsh," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I was the assistant director of research for Project Oracle until 1995. She placed an old leather journal on the table. "Your father wanted you to have this." Marcus stared at the journal, his throat tight. "You knew he was going to die." Regina's eyes held a mixture of sadness and steel. "James discovered something that certain people wanted to keep buried. He knew the risks, but he believed the truth was worth it." She pushed the journal toward him. Project Oracle wasn't just about enhancement, it was about evolution. The waitress approached, but Regina waved her away. "Dr. Harrison's research proved that human potential could be unlocked through specific genetic triggers. We succeeded beyond our wildest expectations." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "But then the subject started showing abilities we couldn't control." Marcus opened the journal, finding pages of his father's meticulous handwriting. What kind of abilities? Telepathy, precognition, things that shouldn't be possible. Regina's hands trembled slightly. The government wanted to weaponize it, but Dr. Harrison refused. She believed the research should be used to help humanity evolve naturally, not create super soldiers. A man in a dark suit entered the cafe, sitting at the counter. Regina tensed. "We don't have much time. Your father found evidence that Project Oracle didn't end in 1995. It just went deeper underground. They're still conducting experiments, but now they're targeting civilians." Marcus's mind raced. The genetic triggers. They're releasing them into the population. Regina nodded grimly. Through water supplies, air systems, even food products, they're playing God with humanity's future, and no one knows it's happening. She stood abruptly. "Page 42 of the journal. That's where you'll find the proof." As she turned to leave, Marcus caught her arm. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" "Because I have a granddaughter," Regina whispered, "and they made it very clear what would happen if I spoke up." She pulled away, disappearing into the lunchtime crowd outside. Marcus waited several minutes before leaving, the journal tucked safely in his jacket. Back in his apartment, he turned to page 42. Tucked inside was a small key card and an address in Alexandria, Virginia. His phone rang. "The office." "Reeves," he answered. "Marcus, it's Director Blackwood. I need you to come in. There's something we need to discuss." The director's voice was pleasant, but Marcus detected an underlying edge. "Of course, sir. I'll be there in 30 minutes." After hanging up, Marcus photographed every page of his father's journal and encrypted the files, sending them to a secure cloud storage. If Regina was right, he couldn't trust anyone, not even his own agency. The drive to headquarters gave him time to think. His father had discovered that Project Oracle's genetic triggers were being deployed across the country. But why? What was the end game? The security guard at the entrance gave him an odd look as he badged in. In the elevator, Marcus noticed the cameras tracking his movement more deliberately than usual. Something had changed. They knew he'd been in the archives. Director Blackwood's office door was open when he arrived. The man himself stood at the window, his back to the door. "Come in, Marcus. Close the door behind you." Marcus stepped inside, every nerve alert. On Blackwood's desk sat the TR-7391 file he'd photographed the night before. "Your father was a good man," Blackwood said, still facing the window. "He believed in doing what was right, no matter the cost. I respected that about him." He turned, his expression unreadable. "But sometimes what's right isn't what's necessary." Marcus felt the weight of his father's gun against his ribs. What was necessary about killing him? Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. You've been asking questions, Marcus. Dangerous questions, just like your father. He sat down, gesturing to the chair across from him. But I'm going to give you something he never had. A choice. Outside the office windows, dark clouds gathered over the city, promising rain. Inside, two men faced each other across a desk, while decades of secrets hung in the air between them. The underground network. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Marcus sat across from Director Blackwood, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. What kind of choice? He asked, keeping his voice steady. Join us, Blackwood said simply. Help guide humanity's evolution. Or, he let the alternative hang unspoken in the air. Before Marcus could respond, the office door burst open. Assistant Director Patricia Thorne strode in, her face tight with urgency. Sir, we have a situation. The Harrison facility has been breached. Blackwood's composure cracked for just a moment. How? Unknown, but the containment protocols have been activated. Thorne glanced at Marcus, then back to Blackwood. All subjects are in wind. Marcus watched the silent exchange between them, pieces clicking into place. The Harrison facility, named after Dr. Natalia Harrison, it was still operational. Take him into custody, Blackwood ordered, but Marcus was already moving. He shoved his chair backward, catching Thorne off balance. The gun pressed against his side gave him confidence, but he wouldn't draw it. Not yet. He dove through the door, sprinting down the corridor. Alarms began blaring throughout the building. Behind him, he heard Blackwood barking orders into his phone. Marcus reached the emergency stairwell, taking the steps 3 at a time. His mind raced faster than his feet. The Harrison facility breach couldn't be a coincidence. Someone else was making moves against Project Oracle. He burst out of a side exit, rain soaking him instantly. 2 security guards rounded the corner, reaching for their weapons. Marcus ducked behind a parked car as bullets pinged off metal. A black van screeched to a stop beside him, its side doors sliding open. Get in. A familiar voice shouted. Regina Walsh sat in the passenger seat, next to a young man with intense green eyes who gripped the steering wheel. Marcus dove into the van as more bullets flew past. The doors slid shut, and the vehicle accelerated away from the building. I'm Jackson, the driver said, weaving through traffic with practiced ease. Former Project Oracle subject. Your father helped me escape. Regina turned in her seat. We've been planning this for months. The facility breach was our distraction to get you out. James left detailed instructions in case anything happened to him. Marcus's head spun. The subjects you mentioned, what exactly are they? People, Jackson said grimly. People they've been experimenting on. Some volunteered, others were taken. All of us were changed. As if to demonstrate, he blinked, and his green eyes briefly glowed with an inner light. The van turned down an alley, then another, following a complex route to shake any pursuit. Finally, they pulled into an underground garage beneath an abandoned warehouse. Inside, Marcus found himself in what looked like a command center. Computers hummed along the walls, and maps covered with markers and strings filled a large table. About a dozen people moved purposefully through the space, some bearing the same strange eyes as Jackson. Welcome to the Resistance, Regina said. We call ourselves the Phoenix Network. Your father was one of our founders. A tall woman approached, her dark skin marked with faint, silvery scars. I'm Dr. Amara Cole, she said. I worked with Dr. Harrison before they shut us down. What they're doing now, it's not what we intended. The genetic triggers, Marcus said. They're not just releasing them randomly, are they? Amara shook her head. They're targeting specific population groups, trying to force controlled evolution. But the changes are becoming unstable. We're seeing mutations, deaths. They're playing with forces they don't understand. A screen on the wall flashed with breaking news. Reports of strange phenomena across the country. Unexplained abilities, Mysterious illnesses, people vanishing. Your father discovered their deployment schedule, Regina explained. The next major release is planned for 3 days from now. They're going to contaminate the water supply of every major city on the East Coast. Marcus studied the maps, the marked targets. How do we stop it? We don't, Jackson said. Not alone. We need proof, enough to expose everything. And we need someone on the inside. He looked meaningfully at Marcus. Blackwood offered me a choice. Regina's eyes lit up. That's our way in. But Marcus, if you do this, there's no going back. These people killed your father. They'll kill you too if they discover you're working against them. Marcus thought of the millions of unknowing people about to be turned into test subjects, of his father's sacrifice, of Dr. Harrison, who'd tried to stop this decades ago. When do we start? He asked. The group gathered around the table, beginning to plan. Outside, the storm raged on, while beneath the city, a different kind of storm was brewing, one that would either save humanity or tear it apart. Breaking point. Marcus adjusted his tie as he walked into Secret Service headquarters the next morning. His new security badge felt heavy against his chest. Blackwood had wasted no time integrating him into Project Oracle's inner circle. The underground lab beneath the building hummed with activity. Scientists in white coats moved between workstations, monitoring screens filled with genetic sequences and population maps. Dr. Samantha Winters, the current project lead, greeted him with a practiced smile. Your father would be proud, she said, leading him through the facility. He never understood that sometimes progress requires sacrifice. Marcus forced himself to smile back, remembering the transmitter hidden under his collar. The Phoenix network was recording everything. Tell me about the distribution plan, he said. The genetic triggers are ready, Winters explained, stopping at a large containment chamber. Inside, a pale blue liquid swirled in massive tanks. Once released into the water supply, the changes will begin within hours. A young researcher approached with a tablet. Dr. Winters, we're detecting anomalies in batch 7. Show me, she said sharply. The data on the screen made her frown. The mutation rate is accelerating. We need to adjust the formula. Marcus watched their exchange, his heart racing. According to Dr. Cole's analysis, the triggers were becoming exponentially more unstable. If released, they wouldn't just change people, they would destroy them. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Package delivered. 20 minutes. Is everything all right? Winters asked, noticing his expression. Fine, Marcus said smoothly. Just some routine security updates. He checked his watch. I should do a perimeter sweep. He was halfway to the door when the alarms began blaring. Red lights flashed as security teams rushed past him. A voice came over the intercom. Containment breach in Sector 7. All personnel evacuate immediately. Winters grabbed his arm. We need to secure the primary samples. Come with me. Instead, Marcus pulled away, drawing his weapon. I don't think so, Doctor. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You're working with them. She reached for an alarm panel, but Marcus was faster, tackling her to the ground. The triggers are killing people, he said, securing her hands. It has to stop. Explosions rocked the facility. The Phoenix network had breached the outer defenses. Through the chaos, Marcus heard familiar footsteps approaching. I had such hopes for you, Director Blackwood said, emerging from the smoke. His own gun was aimed steadily at Marcus's head. Just like your father, too idealistic for your own good. It's over, Marcus said. We have proof of everything. The experiments, the deaths, all of it. Blackwood smiled coldly. Do you really think proof matters? We're saving humanity from itself. In 1,000 years, they'll thank us. If anyone's left alive, Marcus countered. Behind Blackwood, he saw Jackson and Dr. Cole moving silently into position, their enhanced abilities making them nearly invisible. The strong will survive, Blackwood said. That's how evolution works. No, A new voice said. Regina Walsh stepped through the smoke, holding a device. That's how extinction works. She pressed a button, and every screen in the facility came to life, broadcasting the truth to every government agency and news outlet in the country. Blackwood's facade cracked. He spun toward Regina, finger tightening on the trigger. Marcus lunged forward as a shot rang out. The bullet never reached Regina. Jackson stood between them, his eyes glowing, the bullet frozen in midair. Evolution works like this, he said, letting the bullet drop harmlessly to the floor. Security teams burst in, but these weren't Blackwood's men. Agent Daniel Hayes, Internal Affairs, stepped forward. Director Blackwood, you're under arrest for treason, murder, and crimes against humanity. As Blackwood was led away, Marcus helped Regina to her feet. The facility's self-destruct sequence had been activated. They had minutes to clear the building. What about the triggers? He asked Dr. Cole. Already neutralized, she said. Your father's research helped us develop a countermeasure. We released it into the ventilation system. They evacuated as the charges began detonating, destroying decades of dangerous research. Outside, news helicopters circled the building, broadcasting the truth to the world. But Marcus knew this wasn't the end. Somewhere, Dr. Harrison was still out there. And there would be others who dreamed of controlling humanity's evolution. What now? He asked Regina as they watched the facility burn. She handed him a file. We found something in the data. Other facilities, other projects. The fight's not over. Marcus opened the file, seeing faces of more victims, more experiments. The weight of his father's legacy pressed upon him. Then we keep fighting. Legacy's dawn. The congressional hearing room buzzed with tension 3 months after the fall of Project Oracle. Marcus sat before the assembled committee, cameras broadcasting his testimony worldwide. The program wasn't just about evolution, he explained, his voice steady. It was about control. They believed they could direct humanity's future through genetic manipulation, regardless of the cost in human lives. Photographs and documents flashed on the screens behind him, evidence of decades of secret experiments. In the gallery, Regina Walsh and Dr. Cole watched silently, while Jackson stood guard, his enhanced senses alert for any threat. Mr. Reeves, Senator Hammond leaned forward. You mentioned other facilities. What progress has been made in locating them? We've identified 3 more sites, Marcus responded. 2 have been shut down. The third, he paused, remembering the firefight in Montana last week. The third proved more challenging. The Phoenix Network had grown since their first victory. Former test subjects, whistleblowers, and government agents who'd discovered the truth, all had joined their cause. But for every facility they shut down, new threats emerged. After the hearing, Marcus met with his team in their new headquarters, a legitimate government facility, now that their operation had official sanction. We found her, Regina announced as they gathered around the conference table. Dr. Harrison. She's alive. Marcus studied the surveillance photo. The woman looked older than in the original Project Oracle image, but her eyes held the same intensity. She'd been spotted in a remote research station in Norway. Is she continuing the experiments? He asked. Dr. Cole shook her head. No. According to our sources, she's been working on reversing the damage. She developed a way to stabilize the genetic changes in affected populations. We're not the only ones who know she's alive, Jackson added. 3 private military teams have been tracked heading toward her location. Marcus considered their options. Dr. Harrison had started Project Oracle with good intentions, using genetic science to cure diseases, enhance human capabilities safely. But others had corrupted her work, turning it into a weapon. We move tonight, he decided. Dr. Harrison's research could help thousands of people affected by the triggers. We can't let it fall into the wrong hands. As the team prepared for deployment, Marcus visited the memorial wall they'd created. Photos of victims and heroes lined the surface, including his father. James Reeves had sacrificed everything to expose the truth, starting a chain of events that would reshape humanity's future. "You were right, Dad," Marcus whispered. "The truth was worth it." Regina approached quietly. "Your father would be proud, not just of what you've done, but of what you've become. A leader of a secret organization fighting shadow government programs." Marcus smiled wryly. "Somehow, I don't think this is what he had in mind for my career." "He wanted you to make a difference," Regina corrected. "And you have." Project Oracle tried to force evolution through fear and control. But look what happened instead. She gestured to where Jackson was training new recruits, helping them understand and control their abilities. Beyond them, Dr. Cole worked with a team of scientists, developing treatments for those affected by the triggers. Real evolution, Regina continued, comes from choice. From people deciding to use their powers to help others, to fight for what's right. Marcus's phone buzzed. The transport was ready. As they headed for the helipad, he thought about the journey ahead. Project Oracle was gone, but its legacy lived on. Not in the genetic triggers or secret experiments, but in the people who'd chosen to stand against them. The helicopter lifted off into the night sky. Below, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing a life they'd sworn to protect. The fight wasn't over. It was evolving, just like they were. "Ready?" Jackson asked from the pilot's seat. Marcus nodded, checking his gear one last time. Somewhere in Norway, Dr. Harrison was waiting with answers about humanity's past and future. But the real question wasn't about genetics or evolution anymore. It was about choice, about using power responsibly, about remembering that the greatest strength comes not from genetic enhancement, but from the human spirit itself. "Ready," Marcus confirmed. "Let's go make a difference." The helicopter banked north, carrying them toward their next mission. Behind them, the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of hope. A new dawn for humanity, built not on control, but on courage, truth, and the indomitable power of choice.